Hi there, you're listening to the Fishing Exploration Show, a show where we will bring you to explore remote fishing destinations from around the globe. We'll bring you interesting people with amazing stories to share, and we'll try and answer some of your questions along the way. Enjoy. Hello, Samuel. Can you hear me? Hello. I can't hear you for now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you, Samuel. How
Okay,
are you?
hey man. Good. How's it going?
Really good. Pleased to have you. Do this with me.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Thanks for having me.
So, welcome, folks. This is episode 1 of the Fishing Exploration podcast, and today we have a very special guest with us. Our guest today created, barely out of high school, from what I understand, a new fly fishing brand. And this is remarkable because when you think of fly fishing brands today in the fly fishing market, we tend to think of saturation. We tend to think of plenty of different brands already out there. And, fantastically, Samuel, which is our guest today, has been able to create a brand which is a new niche. And it's a niche which caters fantastically to lots of frustrations and problems, I would say, that many fly fishers have today. So without further ado, our very special guest today is Samuel Cates from Tiny Tenkara. Welcome, Samuel.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
No worries. So do you want to maybe explain in a nutshell what Tiny Tenkara is, where you're from, and where you're calling us from today?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm Colorado native, born and raised in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And that's where I'm calling you today. We're all back home from college. They've put us all in online classes, so we're all back at our permanent residences. But Tiny Tenkara really started out of the fact that being born and raised in Colorado, I grew up fly fishing, loved it, still love it. And I would go on hikes with my family, and we have canyons around our house, and all these canyons have a creek that go through them. And in these creeks, we have, beautiful cutthroat trout and brook trout, and they're just everywhere. And I would love to have gotten in there and try to fish these streams, but they're so overgrown that I couldn't get any rod that I had in there, whether it be like a 9-foot Western fly rod, or in fact, I had a 13.5-foot Tenkara rod, and those were all far too long to get in there and fish those creeks. So essentially, Tiny Tenkara, I just took the concept of a Tenkara rod and I shrunk it down to a more manageable size, so you can get in there and fish those more intimate waters there in the canyons.
Wow, that's fantastic. And so when did you started this a couple of years ago when you were just out of high school, right?
Yeah, so I started this end of junior year, beginning of my senior year in high school. And then now I'm a junior in college. So that was like 3 or 4 years ago. But yeah.
And so it started out on Kickstarter with what you call the Tiny 10. Is that correct?
Yeah. So that's the name of my original rod. I came up with the idea, and I originally just got a couple of prototypes made, and I just was gonna have the whatever one I liked. I was just gonna keep for myself, and just because I wanted to be able to fish these creeks. And then it was actually my mom suggested to me. She was like, "Why don't you see if there's a market for this?" And so then I discovered Kickstarter, and that's a great way to raise that initial little amount of capital that you need to start, a small fly rod business. But it also is great because it told me that there were actually a lot of people out there that also wanted this, this rod, that had the same problems that I was having. And that was a great experience.
And so what is when I think about starting a fly fishing brand today in 2020, I can't even begin to imagine what it takes, Can you break it down relatively simply for us? What are the process? So you start on Kickstarter, and then you have to
Sure.
reach out, I imagine, to do you have to design something, or how does it work?
So it's actually a lot simpler than you would think. So because Tenkara rod is such a simple fishing tool, right? It's just basically rolled carbon or graphite or fiberglass blanks, whatever you use, on a cork handle. That's it. So basically, I just had the idea, and I just contacted a bunch of uh, Tenkara rod makers out in China, and I just gave them the dimensions. I said I want a rod that extends to 1.5 meters, collapses down to 20 centimeters. I want the cork handle to be 10 centimeters, and I want it to have the softest action you can give it. And then that was the extent of the product design I did. I just and then they took care of the rest of it, which was great. So then once the rod's produced, right, go on Kickstarter, get your funds. And then after the Kickstarter ends, I just use those funds just to keep buying more rods as I would run out of rods. Like that just is the initial first order, and it's just kind of snowballed from there. And then in terms of like creating the brand itself, that's kind of all I do is it's all on social media, right? Just being part of Facebook groups, having a Facebook page, having, an Instagram. And what I've been trying to do in the last year or so is I'll sponsor people. So if I see a page that I like, then I'll just send them a rod for free. And I'll say, can you tag me in 10 posts? Or if they're a YouTube channel, I do that a lot with YouTube channels where sometimes they'll contact me, sometimes I contact them. And then, that way it gets my name out there, I get some good customer reviews. And that's kind of how the brand was built.
Wow, fantastic. And you ship worldwide, and you've had customers from all over the world. Is that correct?
Yep. Every continent except for Antarctica.
Wow,
So,
fantastic.
yeah.
That's really good. Tell us a bit more about the rod strings down to, about this size, but extended, how big is it?
So we're talking 1.5 meters fully extended, which is, I think, just north of 5 feet. If I'm
Okay. Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, and so that was 3 or 4 years ago, and since then, I see on your website that you've extended that offering to a second rod, something called the Tiny 2, and then you've also started to do packs. I understand.
Yeah.
And a couple other things. Talk us through that.
Sure. So I'll just walk you through the Tiny 2 first. That's a lot of T's. But and I would get emails from customers, every once in a while saying, like, do you have something just a little bit longer? I need something just a little bit longer. And so I took the basically the initial design of the Tiny 10, and I just made it a little bit bigger. So now that rod extends all the way out to 8 feet. So now the reason I originally didn't have a rod that big is because there were some companies out there like Tenkara Rod Co. And others that would make an 8 to like a 10-foot rod. So that part of the market, there's already embedded brand names in there, and so I didn't want to touch that. But it turns out that a lot of people wanted a longer rod, but I also think they wanted a rod that was quality and didn't want to pay $135 for an 8-foot Tenkara rod. So with the Tiny 2, I took the best things about the Tiny 10, right? Which is its affordability, its quality, but also the biggest thing for me is how small it compacts down to, right? If you have a traditional Tenkara rod, I mean, it's huge. When they're even fully collapsed, and it's hard to carry them around, So I took that and I made this rod, which is longer, and thus it's much more flexible as well, which is the biggest criticism that I had of the original Tiny 10 is, to quote someone from Reddit, it had the flexibility of a broomstick. So try to address that.
Wait, that's the first one, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
The first one, because it's so short with so many sections, it's a rather hard cast. But so I try to address that in the second one.
Okay, cool. And then the second one is 8 foot, you said? Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Extends all the way out to 8 feet.
Okay, and collapsible, it's around about the same size as the first one, or a little bit bigger, I imagine.
Yeah, a little bit bigger. It's closer to, I want to say 13 centimeters.
Okay,
Uh,
that's still really small though.
yeah. So
Okay,
maybe
crazy.
I'm thinking 13 inches. It's definitely longer than the other one. Sorry, it's weird when I order stuff. Like I have it in inches, but then the people I order from are all in like Europe or China, and so I've got to convert it to centimeters. So it gets a little
Yeah,
funny.
you must get pretty good at that over time.
Yeah.
But so talk us through the pack. I saw you have a pack on online.
Sure. So these packs are a collaboration with Yona Packs, which is uh, he's a guy out in I think he's back in Georgia now, but I found him on Etsy, and I needed a little small fly pack that because when I go fishing with the Tiny Ten, I just need a box of flies, tippet, maybe an extra line with a like line holder with line on it, and some floating. And so I just needed a small pack, and I found this guy out in Georgia, and so we just have a collaboration where he'll make me the packs. I ship him out some patches to put on them, and they're great handmade, perfectly sized fly fishing packs.
Okay, cool. And you sell those also worldwide, so anyone can go and buy those on your website. Okay, so now I have a couple of, as I was telling you before, I have a couple of questions from users online, some of our community. And I think these are pretty relevant questions. If I were going onto your website to buy the any of your rods, I would want to ask these questions. The first one is from a guy called Fly23 Mania, and it's how far can you cast the Tiny 10? The first one.
Okay. All right. So because these rods are designed for super small creeks, I mean, we're talking 4 to 6 feet, something you could walk over if you had to. So basically what I recommend when setting up your rod is you have a meter. So the rod extends out to 1.5 meters. And then I recommend you put 1.5 meters of the level line on it. So whether you've got a furled leader or you're using like a 0x monofilament, you automatically put the same amount that is the rod length. And then the rest of it, since these creeks are overgrown, I essentially only use the bow and arrow cast when I'm fishing with the Tiny 10. I very rarely am doing an overhead cast because I don't have the back cast at
Sure.
all in these small creeks, right? So then the amount of tippet you put on really depends on your own wingspan. So when you draw the fly back to do the bow and arrow cast, it just depends on that length that enables you to do that comfortably, right? If it's too long, then you're drawing it way back here. If it's too short, you don't get to draw it back at all. So basically you should be casting around, maybe 2 meters, like 10 feet or something like that. But for example, if you wanted to take it, I've fished the Tiny 10 on like an alpine lake. You can throw a lot more level line on there, maybe 3 meters, like double that, and really huck it out there if you have the room. But
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
generally, about 3 meters of cast.
Okay. And actually, I'm going to skip down a couple of questions here because it leads on quite well to a question from a guy called SLOVIX, who says, how does the Tiny 10-1 handle big fish?
Okay. So, as the thing is with most Tenkara fishing, when handling big fish, it's not really the rod's problem, but the problem I've encountered is the tippet that I'm using or the line that I'm using. So I normally use a 6X tippet, which is good for fish maybe up to 15 inches. But after that, they really start breaking pretty frequently. So the rod itself is very sturdy. I've like tested it with just by tying like weights to the tip, like through a line, and I've got it up to 25 pounds without breaking. I haven't tested it to breakage yet, but you should not have a problem with the rod breaking. It should mostly be the line you're using.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Another question here is from Netvol8, and he says, or she says, do you recommend I get this rod for my 6-year-old, or is it too fragile? I guess your previous answer sort of covers that as well.
Yeah. So I definitely would recommend. It's a pretty sturdy rod, and I'd say the one thing you have to be worried about, as with all fly fishing rods, is just that tip section. That's the most fragile part. So, you could always, we do have replacement tips available. But yeah, I mean, for your 6-year-old, it's great because you're not going to give them a $135 Tenkara rod if they do break it. It's quite an affordable thing
Mm.
for a kid to have. So
Yeah, I can see this as a perfect, first rod for any kids and people. Because the cast is much easier than on a Western fly rod. You don't
yeah,
have the reel to worry about, and can be a great way to get the kids started.
exactly.
One of the questions was, what are some of your favorite flies? That's my question to you.
Gotcha. Okay, so I believe the purest form of fly fishing, right, is dry fly fishing. So I live for the dry flies. My go-tos are going to be these: parachute Adams, uh, elk hair caddis, blueing olive, and grasshoppers. And those are essentially the only 4 dry flies I ever need. You'll find, at least for me, when I'm fishing these small creeks, they are really these are native, naive fish. They're not really comfortable. They're not used to fishermen's presence. So they haven't been fished that much. This might be the first time this fish is being caught in its life. So they're really naive. So you can really throw anything at these small, like these fish on these little creeks, and they'll take it just because they don't see a lot of food and, they don't know any better. So I've found that those 4 flies are great. And the sizes I'm using is normally like an 18 to a 22, so pretty small.
Sure, sure. So another question I have for you, Sam, is what would be your, fly fishing destination bucket list? Your top 3.
Sure. Okay, so my top 3 it's got to be Patagonia, and then I'd love to go to New Zealand and just chuck large terrestrials at big brown trout, and then I think my number 1 though would be fishing the chalk canyons for grayling in Slovenia.
Oh,
Would
that's
be my
actually,
top one.
yeah. So that's actually really close to where I am. I'm in Switzerland at the moment, and we have similar streams over here, but we
Yeah,
don't have the marble trout because in Slovenia they have marble trout,
yeah,
and those look absolutely insane. So
yeah.
I share that destination with you. It's on my bucket list as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the water's just so clear and blue. It looks phenomenal out there.
Cool, wonderful. What? Uh, when was the first time you went fly fishing? How did you get into this sport?
Sure. I probably can't remember the first time. I just have a whole childhood of my dad taking me out. So I probably started when I was maybe 7 or 8. And we have a beautiful canyon up here called 11 Mile Canyon. And my dad would take me all the time. And yeah, so I can't remember the specific, like first fish I ever caught, but it's been a long time.
And then something I like to ask is, what is the story, of the one that got away? The big fish you had on the line, and unfortunately it
Sure.
disappeared.
Yeah. Okay. So my family, we love to vacation in Florida. And so when we go to Florida, I'll bring just a traditional Western fly rod and I'll go out and just do some surf fishing where I'll have, like a little shrimp fly on there and it's all day just setting it out and stripping it in. And one time we were out there in June, which is when they have the tarpon run. And I can remember casting and I thought, when I was casting out there, I saw this thing and I thought it was a log or a shadow, but it just turns out it was this huge tarpon. And I don't have the rod, I had like some tiny 6-weight rod or something like that. So I was not ready to catch the tarpon, but I was stripping it in and I saw it turn and look and follow my fly. And I was almost, I think subconsciously I ended up stripping it in faster so it wouldn't get it because it would have completely messed up my rod and all my line and stuff like that. But that I always remember that one as like the biggest fish that I've ever enticed with an artificial lure.
Oh wow, your heart must have been beating really
Yeah,
fast when you see the fish turn.
yeah, it was crazy.
Okay, I actually missed one of the questions, and this is from Min Fox Z. And I think it's a good question. Does any of the 2 rods do they come with the line holder? The one you clip on the rod?
Sure. So, um, they do not come with them, but I do have an accessories pack which comes with the level line, and I prefer the circular foam line holders. Um, I just like those ones better than the other.
Sure.
And so you can get that, and I think it's like $8, $12, something like that. So
Cool. And you
yeah,
buy that when you buy your Tiny 10, you just buy it as an add-on.
yeah, exactly.
Cool. Wonderful. Um, I guess what's next for Tiny Tenkara. Do you have plans for the future? What are you planning?
Sure. So I would really like to get into some trade shows, have a booth somewhere. I think that would be awesome. Coming, because I now have, kind of have a good customer base and have more years in the field. So I'd like to start moving on to the more professional things like a trade show. Um, I'd also really like to start getting my rods in fly shops. Like a more retail presence would be great. I'm not sure. My mom really wants me to do T-shirts for Tiny Tenkara, but we'll see about that. Maybe some merchandise coming up in the future.
Caps.
Yeah, some hats, some shirts. Um, but besides that, I don't anticipate bringing out a third version of the rod. I've been I might come out with one. They have those Zoom Tenkara rods. You can lock them into different lengths. Maybe something like that in the future, but we'll see if there's enough demand for it. But generally, just the retail and the trade shows is the big thing coming up.
Because your niche is really the smallest. Your unique selling point is that you really have the smallest rods on the market, right?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
that's what you want to focus on.
Yeah.
Does it frustrate you to see that? Because you were obviously the first, but since then there have been one or two, larger manufacturers that have, I wouldn't say copied, but sort of have ventured into the smaller rods market. Does that frustrate
Sure.
you?
I mean, not a little bit, but not really. I still believe my rod has, it's got an upper leg on all these guys. One, just because it's a quality rod that doesn't cost $135, right? If you're going to buy 8 feet of graphite, I don't think that should cost over $100. So, um, and I think that is a big selling point for my rod, and also the fact that my rod, like, it collapses down smaller. So even though the rod lengths that they're selling out there are, similar when fully extended, it's just the portability of when you've got to carry it to the stream itself that I think I've still got an upper hand on. But it is definitely cool to see other people making rods like this. And at the end of the day, like, I just, it's growing. We're not even close to market saturation. Just to see other people getting out there fishing with this style of fly fishing is cool to see anyway. So
And I guess if people are copying you, it means you're doing something right.
yeah, that's true. I guess what is it? Imitation is the best form of flattery. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Okay, cool. And just to close this off, what can we do, us listeners and members of the community to support you and small businesses during the COVID crisis? I gather you're still open and you're still shipping.
Yeah. So since we're all online, we're still open for business. Everything's running basically per the usual. We got a slight delay on our restock, but I'm looking at a bunch of rods that still need to be bought and shipped, so we should be okay.
Cool. And so just to confirm, it's www.tinytenkara.com. You're also available on Instagram, Facebook, all the social media profiles, right?
Yep. Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and it's all Tiny Tenkara.
Wonderful. And if listeners are interested, there's an article which we've written, an exclusive interview with Samuel Cates, and that can be found on our website. And it covers a bunch of topics which we haven't covered also today. Anyway, thank you, Sam. It's been really interesting. Wonderful to have you on the show, and hope to catch up with you soon.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much.